All right. You ready to clap?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. All right. So I'll introduce us, and then we'll go for it.
Okay. I'm Steve. This is Micah. We're on his vlog.
We're on the vlog, the Rad Dad's vlog.
Rad Dad.
All right, welcome back to Rad Dads. Glad to have you. This is your host, Micah Sherman, and this is a big day because this is our first video podcast for Rad Dads. We're giving it a shot, seeing if you like it, seeing if you don't. I hope so. We'll see. There's a lot of things that I'm learning here, so we're gonna roll with it. If you want to check these out, we got some new Rad Dad swag. This was gifted from a friend named Wilson Cow. So if you like it, let me know, and we can try and make something happen. So here we go. So our guest today, I'm going to give the scouting report.
All right.
And introduce you.
Okay.
So you're just going to have to sit back and just enjoy what I've searched on you. You got actually quite...
sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
That's right. Exactly. So here we go. So we have Dr. Steve Bast here today. Steve is a native to Southern California, born and raised in San Gabriel Valley. He attended Damien High School in Laverne, where he was two-sport All-American and was included into their Hall of Fame in 2010. That's pretty cool.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
1986, with the Boston Red Sox, he played 5 years with the Boston Red Sox organization, which is really awesome. Completed a sports medicine fellowship at the Carolyn Jobe Orthopedic Clinic. Did I pronounce that right?
Curlin Joan.
Curlin Joan. I apologize. While there, he took care of some professional athletes from a wide variety of sports, including the Lakers, Dodgers, Ducks, Kings, Galaxy, AVP, PGA, and of course the USC Trojans.
That's right.
He continued to assist. Fight on, let's go. He continued to assist in the care of the LA Lakers until 2016. We'll get more into that because I want to know more about that. And he has been a private practice in Covita, an orthopedic surgeon, and been in California for past 20 years doing that. Enjoys taking care of the patients from a place he calls home. And you have been married, am I right on this?
35 years.
35. I had 34. 35 years going on 36,
yeah.
Which is such a testament to an awesome marriage, which leads us to, well, first, let me just welcome you.
Thanks.
Steve,
Thanks for having
Steve
me.
Bast,
That's
welcome
awesome.
to the show.
Thanks. It's really fun to be here.
Yeah.
So you would even want me to be here. So.
Of course. You've been on my list of interviewees to interview, so thanks for being down. So that leads us into your family. Can you kind of introduce who Dr. Bast is at home and who your family is?
Sure. So I, as you said, been married 35 years, going on 36. Met my high school sweetheart, Antoinette. We've been married for that long time. Dated 7 years prior to that. And then after that, we had, in 1989, our first child, Ryan, who is now going to be 34, it sounds like.
Wow.
Yeah, 34. 1992, Nick was born. He's going to be, 32 this year, which is crazy.
Yeah,
coming up
flying
in March.
by.
And then we had our first daughter and only daughter, in Sid in 1995.
Cool.
Subsequently, being dad to those 3 kids has been a blessing, and now being a grandparent to 3 going on 4 kids.
Right.
Now that they're all married.
I said 3.5 since
3.5.
yeah.
That's right. So, but they're married to Kate and Carly and Tyler. So it's great, and they're all awesome.
Cool. So a little bit of some other background. What I like to do, Steve, if you've listened to a Rad Dads episode, is
I haven't actually. So, but that's just because I'm not very social media.
But maybe your episode's the first to watch.
All right,
to listen
well, there
to.
you go.
We'll see. So I checked in with your family. I asked them to give 3 words to describe who you are. And some of them did even more than 3 words. So here we go. So Nick, your son Nick, said, "You are diligent, gracious, and driven. I love how my dad will give without expecting anything in return. I love how much he cares for people, even if he doesn't know them. And I love how God has changed his heart." Ryan mentioned, "You are loyal, protective, and steadfast. I admire my dad's desire to learn, grow, and keep an open mind to change." And then your daughter Sid says she loves that you are a teacher, you are a giver, very generous. You're gifted at building relationships because of his genuine interest in others. And she said, "I think he calls this name face story when he meets somebody." What's that mean?
I know your name, I know your face, do I know your story?
That's the question.
That's the question. And
Right.
actually, I got that from a friend of mine, Greg Plutko, who's been a longtime friend and also a rad dad. You might want to talk to him sometime.
Oh, yeah.
He's awesome. But that was his kind of story.
Cool.
Like, how do you talk to somebody? How do you meet somebody? How do you engage with someone? And by knowing their name and their face is great, but if you don't know their story, then
you don't really know them.
Engage them.
And then she also mentioned that you're just a great problem solver, Mr. Fix-It, coming in like dads do. And then last but not least, your wife, Antoine, said you are an amazing husband, father, grandfather, godfather, son, brother, uncle, friend. A lot more to add to that. She admires your faith that you share every day with those that you're around, which I appreciate too. And your compassion and love for others is what drives you to do what's right and make a difference in the world. So there you go.
There you go.
And I actually had to delete a lot of that because they added a lot. So I'll send the rest of it to you later.
I'm humbled by that already, so that's good.
Great. And then we know each other really because of my wife Cosmo. Yeah. She danced with your daughter Sydney
at my mom's dance studio.
Right. And you guys your families kind of grew up together, right?
Correct. Yeah. Cosmo was, I think, 7 or 8 when I first met her, maybe even younger than that. But
right.
And then she kind of naturally took Sid under her wing, which was cool. And then our families became good friends because we were traveling everywhere, going to dance competitions.
Right. Yeah.
So,
lots
cool.
of dance.
Yeah, lots of dance.
And then we met.
More dance probably than I wanted. Sorry, Mom,
yeah,
I
right.
love you, but
there's a lot of dance.
After 40 years in a row, it was, I'm just kidding. It was awesome.
And then we met through Southlands Church. I think Cosmo kind of inviting Nick, your son, to church.
Yeah.
Kind
of led him to the Lord.
Right. Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, and I got to be a part of just praying for him. So, and I feel like kind of the rest was history from there, at least from our relationship. So, and you guys have been just such a blessing to our family, supporting us, just emotionally, and I mean, you've helped us figure out where we're living. We were in Santa Barbara. You helped out there, and so you guys have been just so gracious to us. Great example of your generosity that your kids were mentioning. So, we love you guys.
I love you too.
Love you a lot.
Wouldn't do it any other way.
So this episode is called Dr. Dad.
Dr. Dad.
Dr. Dad. So I'm going to ask you some doctor questions that maybe somebody...
I passed my MCATs, Mike. I don't know.
Okay, good. No, we're going to get into if you're a dad or a parent in the medical profession, kind of some advice there and whatnot. So right into it. Thinking about the craziness of med school, I've talked to your son that's gone through it, and it is wild and crazy. So what kind of advice would you give to parents or dads that are going through med school, maybe while raising a family?
Well, have an incredible wife.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's number one, which I definitely did. I don't think I appreciated it as much when I was going through it as I do looking back on it now, watching my son go through it. That, Carly and the hours that Nick's gone, I was gone those same amount of hours, and it's a lot.
Yep.
But how they handle it, and at the time, interestingly enough, our faith was good, but I think walking with the Lord would have been a lot more helpful, having a work-life balance in that respect. But you're kind of so busy, literally working 100-plus hour weeks, trying to take care of people that are sick and traumatic injuries, that kind of stuff, that you start to lose that family kind of focus. Because you're exhausted and you get home and you got, for me at the time, it was 3 kids. And
you're running on fumes.
Yeah, you're running on fumes, and they're tired and mom's tired, and it's like, man, how do you hold it all together? And I think that's where our faith was pretty helpful for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Faith. So faith and having an incredible wife, being on the same page probably is your spouse.
Yeah. Which isn't always easy when you're tired, obviously, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
we get hangry, but we can also get, with sleep deprivation, it can be even worse. You know, just get tired and you just don't want to, you're just exhausted. So.
Cool. So, and would you say, are there any things that you have learned about fatherhood or that God has kind of taught you through being a doctor? Any things that have kind of like that you've learned or,
wow.
Yeah.
Many things.
Yeah.
Fatherhood is nurturing and caring and loving and really just having compassion for your family, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of, and that's no different for a physician. I mean, a
Sure.
physician, it just now becomes, instead of your family, it's your patient.
Right.
And being able to transfer that in a loving, kind way when you got to tell somebody that they just lost a loved one, or you got to tell them that they, hey, they may not be able to do this again, or
Right.
things like that. Those can be really challenging. And so I think that they kind of go hand in hand. Like,
Right.
I think that if you're a good dad and you can and really understand how to communicate well with your family and your children, I think it can translate into being even a better physician because you've had those life experiences.
Sure.
That, like, for example, now in my practice, when someone gets hurt and it's a sports type injury, having an injury myself,
Right.
or and trying to explain, like, hey, I've been there, I get it, that I think that translates really well when you're
Sure.
trying to communicate with your patient, like, hey, I get it, it's not just an elbow, it's really like your whole being.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you
And your
handle
identity
that
often.
afterward, right? Sometimes your identity, especially if you're not able to go back to that sport, right? And you identify through that sport your whole life.
Right.
Now it's gone. And now how do you identify? And I have those
Right.
conversations, believe it or not, more frequently than just the injury conversations with the family and the kids. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like the families. You have a
Right.
kid, so
Right.
you have a family there, and their kids hurt.
Right.
Like you've been through it, or you can
Yeah,
kind of give
yeah.
your story, your
Your
experience.
insight, your
Right.
insight to what's there. I think that's classic, right?
Super valuable. Yeah, for sure.
I think it would be anyway, for sure.
Yeah. And have you had any? I've got to ask, as a doctor, have you had any like just God miracle moments as a doctor that you're like, how did that happen, kind of thing?
Yeah. Actually, I've had it. It's pretty great. My niece, not even me as the physician. My niece, who was about a year in July and a half ago. So what is that? July, a year and a quarter, whatever. Called me, and she had stage 4 malignant melanoma, and literally we went out to her, Antoinette and I, and prayed over her. And stage 4 malignant melanoma can be a death sentence.
Wow.
I mean, once you've had that, extensive, where that metastasizes or spreads to different parts of her brain, her lungs, her kidneys, and hers was actually her eye. And it was pushing her eyeball completely out of her eye socket.
Wow.
And this is amazing to me, but we prayed over her, and a guy named Jim Allison came to her husband's mind, and this guy created this antibody that fights malignant melanoma, and she's actually a year and 4 months now, and pretty much tumor free.
No way.
And it's because this guy found a new cure for this malignant melanoma, and it was just kind of through connections, and God works in really different ways.
Totally.
And so it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience, and now to see where she's at, and just her relationship with God, you can see that he's given her this for lots of reasons, right?
Totally.
But
he uses everything, right?
Yeah, he does. And it's purely by his grace. So
yeah, it's cool to see how God works in like through people and circumstances, and sometimes it's like a miraculous, like there's no other explanation than God.
Yeah, I could show you a picture of before and after. You wouldn't even recognize her. It's completely different. It's amazing. I mean, I think about it now, and it's just kind of, it's pretty emotional. So it's cool.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned that you have helped or been doctor to a number of different professional teams, including the Lakers.
Yeah.
Got to ask, did you help out Kobe?
Did I help out Kobe? Kobe didn't need any help.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's Black Mamba.
He was pretty darn good athlete.
Yeah.
So at Curlin Job Orthopedic Clinic, where I did my fellowship, we would take care of multiple athletes,
right,
and multiple professional teams. And then after that, Dr. Lombardo, who was the lead physician for the Lakers, would ask me to cover the Lakers when they came out to Citizens Bank Arena at the time, which is out in Ontario, and I would take care of them during those games. And and so I think it was actually always a fun experience being around elite athletes, and I think Kobe was a special guy. It was funny, the one conversation that I had with him just before my last. This is like 2016. I had read a book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath.
Okay.
And I was sharing it with Gary Vitti, the trainer at the time, and Kobe kind of chimed in and said, "Yeah, it was one of my favorite books of all time."
Oh, no way.
And I said, "Really? Why is that?" And he said, "Yeah, it's just, I think that's life. Like we have one picture, and I don't want to ruin the book, but one picture of how things should be.
Yep.
But in the David and Goliath story, everybody thinks Goliath is going to win because he's the favorite.
Right.
Right. But David, really, when you look at all the details of it, David really was the favorite. But we just looked at it in the wrong perspective. And I think Kobe took that mentality, and whatever he did, his perspective was very different than most of the athletes. And
right.
It was pretty funny. Then he went out and played against Steph Curry, who was playing that day.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting on the bench, and
right.
And Steph Curry, and it was funny because Steph Curry just talked about it just recently on a podcast, and Nick sent me the information over to. It was really cool, and he said. Phil Jackson was a coach, and he said to Phil Jackson, like, "Hey, I want to cover him, and it's preseason, right? So they don't need to be out there." And,
sure.
But Kobe wanted to see what this hot new Steph Curry at the time he was a young first or second year rookie, and he full court pressed him all the way from the baseline all the way down. And if you hear Steph Curry's like, "What the heck is going on here?"
Yeah.
And then he fumbles down and falls back and hits a 3-pointer on Kobe, right?
Right.
And then Kobe kind of running back taps him on the butt like, "Hey, nice job, rookie," kind of thing, And he comes back to the bench, and now I'm hearing the conversation.
Yeah, right.
He's like, "I got him, Phil." It was just kind of that, like, he just wanted to test what he could do against him and where he was at, and kind of push his envelope.
Yep.
But then he was comfortable enough to say, like, he's good, but I think I got it.
All right.
Yeah, so it was
man,
cool.
what an experience. Like, you always
it was a cool experience.
That.
I mean, it was funny when Nick sent me the video just recently. He's like, "Dad, weren't you at this game?" And
I feel like I've heard of that story before, and to know that you were there, just like in earshot. That's awesome.
Yeah, I have a picture of me sitting next to Kobe and talking with him. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. Would you say that was kind of like one of the bigger highlights as far as people that you've gotten to work with?
Oh gosh, I've been so blessed to work with a lot of like really cool athletes at many different levels. I think that Kobe was one, Shaquille was one, Ted Williams was one that I thought was an incredible. That wasn't when I was a physician; that was when I was a player. And,
okay.
I mean, there's. But the thing that it's amazing to me is that those guys don't view themselves any different than you and I view each other, right? Because they're pretty humble. I mean, they're confident, don't get me wrong, but they're also very talented.
Sure.
But their confidence is really based on a lot of things.
Right.
But most of them have some significant faith that I think a lot of people, they try not to go out and create this big aura around it and just trust it. So I think that's where they get. But it's fun. I think all of them are like you and I. They're good human beings, and you just try and do the best you can for them to take care of them, make sure that they're doing the right stuff. So.
But you don't often see that just kind of day-to-day normal, like you see either the highlights or the lowlights, and so getting to see those. Yeah,
see the little innuendos in between it, right? Which is, you're kind of like, wow, it's kind of cool. I got to
totally
be around that environment.
See them as a normal person in those day-to-day moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
And they're just like you and I. They put their pants on the same way. It's amazing.
Really?
It's amazing.
And they don't just snap their fingers and then it just
does it. Yeah. No. Maybe they'll pull their sweats off pretty quick. But
right. Yeah. But that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. And then you also, I love sports. I've gotten to coach. I've been coached my whole life. You coach a team called the Knuckleheads.
I coached a team called the Knuckleheads.
You coached a team called the Knuckleheads.
Yes.
I love hearing those stories from for coaching dads out there. Can you share maybe kind of your top 3 values you instilled in your team that I can think of one. I'll say it at the end if you don't say it, but maybe kind of those couple 3 that you were
coaching. So we were called the Knuckleheads because I wanted our kids to just have fun, right? And our shirt said Knuckleheads on the front, but on the back it said just a name, not the way we play. Right? So I wanted them to be able to have fun and enjoy the game, but understand how the game is played properly and understand the proper mechanics. And I think the biggest thing that I see now in my profession with travel ball and all these things is that we sometimes lose that process of actually educating the kids on having fun, which is important, but understand the fundamentals of the game as well, and not just playing 180 games in a year and that makes you better. That doesn't work that way usually. So as a coach, I would really instill like, hey, teach them the fundamentals of the game. Just don't go play 100 games. It doesn't make a difference. That's number one. Number two is my biggest saying is be a cart returner, don't be a cart leaver.
That was the one I was going to say.
So there's two types of people in the world. There's cart leavers and there's cart returners. And a cart leaver is the guy who makes an excuse, so it's too far to return my shopping cart, or it's somebody else's job, or why do I have to do it? But the cart returner is the guy that says the right thing to do is return the cart, so that's what I'm going to do.
Amen.
And so I think that's actually, if you ask, I think I hear it all the time back. Coach, hey, I returned my cart. Like I'll get texts or emails once in a while like, Coach, I still think about returning my stupid shopping cart because of you. And I'm just like, good. Well, at least I made one impact.
Right.
And the other one is be a fountain, don't be a drain. Right, which is, and I heard this actually when we were in Hawaii. I think it was University of Hawaii's coach was talking about it to his players and to the teams that were at this competition. And he was talking about generally just, like there's two types of baseball players. The guy that goes 4 for 4 and he gets back in the dugout and his team loses and he's like, hey, I did everything I could do for the team. You guys lost. Right. And that's the drain that sucks the life out of the team. Versus the fountain that goes 0 for 4 hitting and makes perfect sacrifice bunt, sacrifice fly, sacrifices himself for his team to win, and he's okay with it. And that would be the fountain of the team. So
I wasn't even a knucklehead, and specifically those two principles, the cart returner and the drain and fountain, like I feel like I'm a teacher, a PE teacher, so I've implemented those somewhere because that's just such a great like imagery and easy to understand of like being somebody who goes above and beyond, as well as like, hey, are you gonna give or take? Are you a giver or a taker? And those are such important principles to pass on. And I kid you not, we were at Target the other day, probably a week ago, and I had my son. And we came out of the Target, and it was even an accident. There was like some extra carts just right outside, but not in the section. I just put it kind of right there, and I kept walking the cart, and it was like you were speaking to me. It's probably the Holy Spirit. And it was like, don't be a cart returner. So I turned back around. We were almost in the car.
It's raining. You don't want to get back there.
Every excuse, right? And that's life too. There's every excuse not to do it, but will you do it anyways? So. Your lessons are going past all the knuckleheads. Well,
that's good.
The rest of knuckleheads.
Hopefully that's a faith-based lesson as well, right?
Amen.
We can always find excuses not to go to Christ. But the right thing is to go to Christ first.
Amen. So being a fountain, not a drain. Be a cart returner, not a cart leaver. And then your first one was?
Well, my first one is I think that don't forget the fundamentals of what you're really doing there, which is fundamentals, right? It's enjoying what you're doing first. As a coach, don't take it too seriously. I used to always do this one with my kids when I would coach them, and I'd have a parent meeting before I'd put the hat on the 10-year-old kid, right? And I'd say, before that I'd say, this is a 10-year-old kid, and then I'd put the baseball hat on him and I go, he's still a 10-year-old kid. Let's not forget that, right? And as a coach, sometimes, and even as a parent, you try and get in these
for sure
kind of worlds where you feel like there's all this stuff that's going on that really, when it all comes down to it, you want to say the last thing I would say is when your kid gets in a car after a game, instead of deconstructing every game and taking it all the way home to dinner and everything else, just look at your kid. And this is actually Bill O'Sullivan said this. He said 5 words: I loved watching you play today. That's it. And that's all you need to say, because then your kid's not getting his identity through his sport. Is getting a day that you love him no matter what he does. So I love watching you play today. 5 words.
That's such good advice.
It is. It's so hard to do as a parent. I was that kid. I was that parent. You can ask my kids. I'd be like, what'd you think of that 3-2 fastball that you missed? What'd you think of that serve?
It's tempting.
It is tempting. And I think that what happens is our kids don't want to let us down, right? And so you kind of get in that process where you're like, okay, I want to support them and I want them to know that I care about it, but really
Yep.
all I need to say is, hey, I really loved watching you play today. That's what mattered to me. Nothing else mattered.
Right.
That's it. So
yeah, keeping what matters most in perspective, which is really your relationship with them.
Right, exactly.
And being their supporting cast, you know.
Yeah. And then
Awesome.
go buy them an ice cream.
Yeah, right.
Win,
And
lose,
end the
or
day
draw.
with a smile.
Exactly.
Cool. And then you are also a grandfather now of, like you said, 3.5 kids.
Yeah.
What do you hope, are there things that you hope to instill in your grandkids that you maybe did with your kids? And maybe are there any areas you hope to do differently this time around as a grandfather?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that your grandkids, I mean, my kids gave me great joy. But I think your grandkids gave you even greater joy. I don't think there's any greater joy than your grandchildren. I think that from a faith-based perspective, I really will instill faith in my grandkids more than I probably did in my kids. I was in a different phase in my life.
Sure. Right.
I was raising kids, and my faith probably wasn't as strong as it is now. And didn't think it was as important as I do think it is now.
Sure.
I think that I would really kind of... It's so fun with Lily. I'll sit at the table and we'll just say, you know, let's say prayers, or with Kai, or even Boston. You ask Boston, like, you know, where's Jesus? And Boston is like, in my heart. So,
that's awesome.
And that's because his parents are teaching him that things too. And Kai, all those things, and Lily, they all love God, and it's important for them to experience that. I think that example. I'll try to, you know, I'll be more of a returner.
Sure. Yeah, in that way,
in that respect, because I think it's a critical part that when you're a young parent, you don't think maybe it's that important.
Right.
You think there's so many things that are way more important, but they're really not.
Right.
And then as you become more wise, you start to look at things a little differently. And I think it's like knowledge and wisdom, right? You know, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom knows that you don't put it in a fruit salad. And I think that's important, because you start to take these wisdom things and start to apply them now
the right way.
Earlier generations, right? So that they can start to become wiser at an earlier age. I think that's really the message that I would share with my grandkids and my kids.
Right, yeah. Continuing that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
Cool. All right. And then going back to being a doctor, Dr. Dad, Dr. Steve Bast. Do you feel like being a doctor, this is something, I didn't even mention this, but I got to interview your son. It was in the first season, I got to interview him as a new dad with Joshua Buckley. So his name is Nick Bast, and he's in his residency, almost done.
Fourth year resident.
Fourth year of residency.
5 years total, but he's fourth year resident, right?
So I got to ask him, as a doctor, does that give you more, do you feel like it gives you more anxiety since you know more about medical profession and whatnot when they're sick? And does that give you more anxiety having too much information, or do you feel like it gives you more peace knowing what to do? I'm curious what you think.
I think that if you're the wife or the spouse of the doctor, I think it gives you more anxiety, because the myself, for example, I would be like, it's fine, he's gonna be fine, it's just this or that or this or that. And you know, your spouse might be like, well, are you sure? Like, yeah, I'm positive. I've seen some really sick kids, and he's not that kid right now.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that sometimes can create some anxiety, because I think that as the doctor in the family, everybody will come to you, right? Because you're supposed to know everything. Right. Which you don't.
Turns out.
And then when you don't have the answers, then they're frustrated, or if you feel like it's not really that critical, then that can be frustrating. And that kind of puts you at an awkward position, because you don't want to be like, listen, I've seen this, and I don't want to be rude, but like, it's going to get better. It's going to be fine. We just got to work through a few things. And then there's times where you're like, okay, they're really sick, and this is serious, and now we've got to kind of take the next steps to make sure that it doesn't get sicker. So I think that it creates anxiety for a little bit, but I think it's more for the spouse than it is for the physicians. Because I think if you ask Nick, you know, he gets concerned when Boston's sick, like we all do. But I think that Carly would be more concerned, because It's just you're the mom, and it's a different.
Sure,
you
yeah.
haven't seen
It's
the
your
things
kid.
maybe
Yeah.
at Children's Hospital when you're around
Right.
and you see some really sick kids, or
Yeah.
or like my wife when the kids were sick, and I'd be at Children's Hospital, I'd see some kids that were
Right.
on their deathbed, and you'd
Yeah.
just be like, okay, our kid's okay. He's got a little cold,
Sure.
or he's got some bad asthma, or whatever it is. It's going to be all right.
Right.
And yes, sometimes it can be really challenging because it's your child, and you don't want them to get sicker, right? That's
Right.
more sicker. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's a word, but yeah.
It almost seems like your spouse doesn't care in the moment that you're a doctor anymore. It's like, I don't care what you say. This is my kid.
Right.
I know them.
Right.
And that would,
And they're not well right now, so we
Right.
need to do something. And you're like,
And-
okay, there's nothing to do. We're going to
Yeah.
be okay. Let's get them.
Right.
Let's get them to the ER. Let's get them to where they need to go, so we can make sure that they're treated
Yeah.
properly. But like, it's going to be okay. And it's just that
Sure.
sometimes but it can be stressful for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting dynamic between
Yeah, it's an
a
interesting
spouse who
dynamic.
isn't in that field and a
Right.
spouse that
Right.
is.
And both, like for Carly, she's a nurse, so she's knowledgeable, and
Sure,
my wife
that's
worked
right,
in
yeah.
urgent cares most of her life, so
Mhm.
she's knowledgeable. And being a mom, forget all the other stuff, is way more knowledgeable than most physicians know. Believe it or not,
Right.
mothers know when their kids are sick.
Sure, yeah, mother's intuition,
The
right?
mother intuition is they know when their kids are sick. Not that the fathers don't, but there's just something about mothers like this isn't normal, like
Right.
this isn't right.
Right.
And so I think those are. And as a physician, if you're not, or as a spouse, either one, if you're not listening, then that's when you really can get burned. Believe it or not.
Sure,
Like,
sure,
okay,
yeah.
let's see it, and okay, we're gonna listen to everything here and make sure it's helpful. So.
And the parents, obviously, and I can relate, like we've been to the hospital with my kids before, but you know your kids, you know their rhythms, you know how they usually are,
Right.
which is kind of good and bad.
Right. But you haven't been sitting in the ER seeing 15 of the same kids going,
Same
this
symptoms.
is what this is. We'll give him
For
this
sure.
and he's going to get better. And that's the difference, right? Where as a physician, you've seen that. So you've seen the same things
Right.
over and over and over and how they respond really well, usually over and over and
Mhm.
over. But you just got to get the treatment so you can get them there.
Right.
And then it's just and then sometimes we used to always say when in a really traumatic case, right? You check your pulse first and then check the patient's pulse, right? Because that's kind of how it works.
Sure, yeah, to take a breath first.
Yeah, take a deep breath, and it's going to be okay, and let's
Sure.
figure out how we can solve this problem.
Cool. That's great. Great advice. And then just kind of lastly, if you could give kind of full circle 3 tips or pointers to any dads, any parents in the medical profession, what would you give them?
Wow. Number 1, love your kids unconditionally and your family. Like, put them first. Put God first.
Yeah.
Put your family right below that. Have a work-life balance where you can spend time with your family and your kids and your grandkids.
Yep.
And then do whatever you can do to lead them to Christ. Whether that be just loving them and letting them find Him, or answering questions, or
Sure.
whatever it takes, because ultimately that's our goal, right? Is to lead people to Christ and know who Christ is in their life. But we're not going to do that. God's going to do that
Right.
in their lives. We're just the instrument that helps them find Him.
Totally, yeah.
Right? I think that's
Right.
what I like to see in all my kids and my grandkids, for sure, for them to see and know who Christ
And
is.
I like how your advice is not just for doctors. That's
Right.
anybody.
Right,
Like
that's anybody,
being a
right.
doctor doesn't really change it. It's the same for any
No.
dads, any
No.
mom. You gotta have that work-life balance. You gotta prioritize them, and ultimately lead them to the way, the truth, and life. Right?
Yeah. I think the thing is it's funny because I think as a parent, you love your kids so much that you don't ever want them to experience bad things or
Sure.
fail at something.
Right.
But I think when I've talked to both Sydney and Nick and Ryan, and I think when I asked them, like how could we have been better parents, they're always said, I wish you would have let us fail a little bit more. I wish you would have let us kind of struggle a little bit more.
Huh.
And as a parent, I don't know, that's really hard to do because,
Right, yeah.
because you
You don't
don't
want
want
them to
your kids-
fail.
you don't want them to fail, you don't want them to struggle.
Right. Totally.
But then I look back at my own life, and I realized that my biggest growth was when I failed or struggled.
Sure.
Right. And I think it's like the athlete, getting back to that kind of full circle.
Right.
Like the athlete doesn't learn as much as he wins as when he loses. Right.
Right.
Because you learn how to adjust, compensate, and overcome whatever adversity you've just kind of been run into.
Yeah.
And it was great. We were up at Camp Agape
Yep.
a couple weeks ago, and the pastor there was really great. He was talking about how things get thrown
Jeff
out.
Hamilton, right?
It wasn't Jeff. Jeff Hamilton was one of the
Okay.
pastors. This was another one. This guy was from Australia.
Okay.
And he was talking about how things get thrown at us, right? Different, stressors in our lives,
Yep.
or difficult times, and how we handle those. Sometimes they hit us and they sting us.
Yep.
Sometimes they hit us and bounce off of us. Sometimes we catch them and we hold on to them. And they can be very painful when you hold on to them.
Sure,
We don't ever want to let them go because they're so painful.
Right.
But what he said at the end, which was great, he got this big bouncy ball, and this guy was throwing pickleballs at him, and with these different stressors, and they were just bouncing off, and the bouncy ball was putting everything through Christ first, right? And those things that you're holding on to, you got to let go, because if you don't, it's just gonna get to a phase where it just eats you up.
Yeah.
Until you really get down to the bottom. But again, it gets back to, you learn the most by struggling and stressors, but it doesn't make it easy. It can make it painful, but that painful growth is, I think, how we become who we are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to give it to your kids, but you, like you said, you think back on your own life, and you're like, those are the biggest times I grew in maturity and in my faith, and maybe even just in relationships too. Being more vulnerable and whatnot.
Right. Being bold and vulnerable, right?
Right.
Vulnerable is a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah.
Right. And we learn that. I think that's wisdom.
Yep.
Right. Being vulnerable to your family.
Yep.
Would probably be my third point if I was saying.
Yep.
Be vulnerable. You don't always have to have the answers as a dad.
Sure.
That was probably one of my biggest, I think, if I would say flaws. I would never, I always want to have the answer for my kids.
Right.
And there's times when you just got to go, you know what? I don't know the answer.
Right.
But I can find out, or I can.
Sure.
Or we can work through this together. Instead of just saying, no, this is the right way, or this is the wrong way, and maybe instilling what you don't know onto them, so that and it can be very confusing. And then it can be very, actually frustrating for the children as well, because they'll be like, I don't know if is dad really helping me here, or is he just trying to make me feel good? Right. There's no transparency or genuine follow through. And I think that's important as well.
And you're modeling that, and when you model that, then they know how to open up to people and to have an actual real relationship, that you're talking about real things in real life, rather than, well, I know who Steve Bast is, but I really don't know what
his name, face, and story.
Name, face, and story.
Right.
Being vulnerable.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, we got to end right there. Just on that point, name, face, and story for sure. Get to know people. Awesome. Well, thank you, Steve, for being on the show.
Of course,
like I said, you guys are such a gift to us. I mean, Nick was in our wedding, and you guys have been such a huge support to us. We get to live out with Sydney when she was in Santa Barbara for a bit, and Ryan and Kate are fantastic too. I think about Kate did some... she's really good at mom hacks, and she did some activities with my daughter, and that just
shout
she
out
loved
to Kate
it.
Bast.
That's right. Yep.
That's right.
So just want to say thank you, and you really are. You guys are just so generous, and even when you don't notice, you guys are making such an impact on people around you just by you guys' love alone and vulnerability and love. So
thanks. Well, thanks for all your love and support too, Mike. And honestly, I think that your example and the example you lead to others is incredible and very Christ-like. So don't ever change.
Thanks for saying that. You're a rad dad.
You're a rad
Steve
dad
Bast.
too. Right back at you, buddy.
Do you mind praying us out, just for anybody that's tuning in, specifically, anybody in the medical profession that are parents and could use some help from the Lord?
All right. Lord, thank you so much for this time with Micah. Thank you so much for just the gift of grace that you give us each and every day, that you're able to just guide us to what the right choices are, to have families like the ones that we have, to have loving kids. And spouses. Just most of all, beautiful grandchildren. Lord, for those that don't know you, Lord, that they might seek you, they might find you, and that you might just soften their heart to know you better. And just know that you have this unconditional love that's just always giving and always graceful. And no matter what we do from a work standpoint, that doesn't matter. What really matters is our love for you. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.